Hi, I'm Brandy,
And I'm Jen.
and this is
Keepin' It Simple.
Hi, I'm Brandy,
And I'm Jen.
and this is Keeping It Simple, podcast dedicated to helping you interpret signs from the universe through the art of symbolism.
And in today's episode, we are going to look at the rabbit, also known as the hare.
Which explains why you're wearing rabbit ears.
Oh, yes, that would explain that for
Yes.
those of our viewers who watch us on video. I have some lovely, lovely, soft little bunny ears. I'm actually really excited about these because a lot of the ears out there are like kind of like really cheap looking.
Those
These
are
are
really nice
real.
looking. Yeah,
And I
those
can
look
even kind of
legit.
I can get a cockeyed ear and like a straight ear, like I'm listening. I'm listening with this one, and this one's a little bit like, So I feel like these are almost true hare ears too, because hare ears tend to be the hare's ears are a little bit longer than the rabbits, just a little bit longer and bigger. So I'm like, I'm working the big ears. So
For
yeah.
the listeners out there that aren't aware, Jen insists on having props.
I do insist on having props, and Brandy allows me my props. That's why we work
As
well.
it works.
She
Yeah,
will
hey, I
probably
should have brought some carrots.
That's I think I have some carrots in the fridge.
Don't you? No, you're not
No,
permitted to
okay.
leave.
We won't Bugs Bunny this stuff. We'll actually get serious. But no, Brandy might never be seen with props, but I shall. And that's why we balance each other.
That is correct. Yeah. One of these days I will. I did have on before I put my headphones on. I had my pearl earrings on for the moon energy going
Ooh.
on, and then I wasn't thinking like you got to put headphones on, fool. Like you got to take those off. That's gonna hurt. Okay, so we're talking about the hare or the rabbit today, and just hit with some keywords, Jen. Like whenever you think of the rabbit, what are some symbolism keywords that come to mind for you?
Top ones for me would be fertility and luck. Those are probably two of the top ones that are universally accepted.
Okay. See, and I think on the flip side of that, but it also kind of goes with it is you've got like the moon and the intuition, which also run right with the rabbit. I mean, that's kind of synonymous with one another. But you also have kind of like that the vibes of like illusion, trickery, the matrix, that sort of thing. So it's interesting how diverse this single symbol may be. And there's other keywords I'm sure we're going to get into because there's a lot out there on the rabbit.
Oh, definitely. I mean, definitely the swiftness would be another one. Cautiousness. We'll get into that some more. And definitely, like you said, that moon energy is very prevalent. Yeah, there's a lot of that's one of the things that makes me nerd out about symbolism is every symbol is so multi-layered. There's always, it's never just one meaning for any symbol. You can dig deep and find lots of different meanings. Oh, and that trickster energy, like you said, lots of trickster energy in many cultures.
So I wanted to kick off for the listeners that don't know this, if you haven't heard our first episode on the Falcon or our intro, we kind of like to keep this as a organic conversation. So we don't really talk about this beforehand. It kind of just we symbol out and do our research and then we come to the table. So I wanted to hit you with some things that I found fascinating. I started sitting down thinking about like just kind of rabbit, hare, whatever. And I started thinking about how many like sayings there are associated with a rabbit. It's kind of amazing if you consider it compared to any other symbol. So here's a couple that I had. People say like producing a rabbit out of a hat. Like that's something, it reminds me of Schoolhouse Rock. Do you remember
Oh
where he
yeah.
pulls the rabbit out of the hat? Yes. So
Yeah.
it's got like that, that producing a rabbit out of the hat, which is that like unexpected results or illusions and stuff like that. So you think about that saying that says all the time, when people come across. The other one was the story, and it kind of goes like the story is tied to the saying, but when people say, like take your time, slow and steady wins the race, that's because of the story between the hare and the tortoise. And so
Right.
that's fascinating to me. This one was really interesting, and I think it's because I had just watched Alice in Wonderland, the new one with, well, when I say new, I'm talking about the one with Johnny Depp. And so it's like,
Right.
mad as a March hare. And
Hmm.
so that's, because during rut season or breeding season, they are frantic. I mean, I live in the hill country, and I know you're in an area of Colorado that's not as industrialized, so rabbits are prevalent, and you know when it's rutting season.
Definitely.
So the other one that got me was to hold. This is interesting. I hadn't heard this one, but I went on like this, like, seriously. It's the saying is to hold the hare and run with the hound. I've never heard that. Have you?
No, I've never heard that one. What does it
So
mean?
apparently, it means basically to play both sides of something.
Oh,
So
trickery.
yes, so I'm interested in that because, to hold the hare and run with the hound. And then it takes you back to the stories of the hare and the hound. So you've got stories of the hare and the tortoise, and then stories of the hare and the hound. Um, and then the other one, which I've heard, but I never gave it thought, was to start a hare, which means to bring up an irrelevant subject in an argument.
Oh,
It's to divert.
I don't know if I know
It's
that one either.
Yeah, so it's to divert the conversation elsewhere or the argument elsewhere by bringing up something irrelevant. And I've thought about that, but I didn't put it into context of the rabbit until I thought, if you've ever seen a rabbit move, they like can spin on a dime and go the opposite direction. It's very fascinating to me the
Oh,
way
well,
that
they
they
also
move.
they zigzag.
Oh yeah,
That's
yeah,
and they
yeah.
have to because it's one of the skills in their toolkit to try their best not to be gobbled up at any given moment.
So
It
to
also
start
makes
a
me
hare,
uh-huh.
I mean, to think about it, the zigzag,
Yeah.
like to change direction suddenly and throw your
Yeah.
person off, is to
Right.
to start a hare. That's fascinating.
I'm going to use that saying now. I love
I
that.
know. I'm gonna start using to start a hare, and which I've like I said, I've heard it. I just never thought about it in reference to a rabbit, and then to hold the hare and run with the hound. I'm gonna start using that because
Yeah.
there's some shady people out there playing both sides.
Girl, you know it. Also, when I read about the zigzagging nature of the rabbit, this is getting off on a tangent, but you love Game of Thrones like I do, don't you?
Oh yes, yes.
So, okay, spoiler alert for anybody who is on the Game of Thrones track a little bit late and has not seen them all. Maybe go ahead and just fast forward 10, 20 seconds because I'm going to just say it. But that
That means 30
scene,
seconds.
yeah, because I will say it too, I'll be too verbose, but that scene with Rakan, they release him to go back to his family. He has to run across the
Yes,
field.
yes,
And he just ran straight. It's like zigzag,
yes,
please.
yes, yes.
And then he got
There,
taken
I
out by an
love that.
arrow.
I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, what are you talking? And then it dawned on me, yes,
He needed the power of the hair. He needed to zigzag.
and move quickly, move
Yeah.
with haste.
Which
Okay,
is a
so
good point because there's trickery, but there's also utilizing that power. Sometimes you need to go in a zigzaggy fashion. Sometimes it's not a linear path you need to be on. Sometimes you need to go a little bit zaggy, but also trickery.
I zigzag regularly in my life. We'll
Mm.
just say that. I have yeah. Okay, so the last saying that I thought was really that again, I've thought of it, I've heard it a million times, and I'm like, oh yeah, when I visualize it, but I never like gave it really in-depth consideration, was having a harebrained idea.
Oh, that's a good one. I do know that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common one, right? So
Yeah.
like you think about it and you're thinking, oh, harebrained like a rabbit, but to really consider, because rabbits are so quick and finicky, and they can have, I mean, if you've ever been around a rabbit, I'm assuming you've been around rabbits where you are, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And I have a
Okay.
friend who raises quote unquote meat rabbits. Uh,
Oh, well, we're going to talk
so,
about your friend with the meat rabbits.
yeah.
Because I have stuff. But I mean, like, so I know I've told you I had a rabbit that I had litter box trained
Right.
that slept in the bed with me. He was solid black because, everything in my
Like your
life is
soul.
just,
Yeah.
I know it's black like my soul. Um, but his name was Munch and Crunch Sir Licks-a-Lot. Yes, like Sir Mix-a-Lot, Sir Licks-a-Lot. And so looking at the rabbit, and I started thinking about harebrained ideas. Like there were so many times I would look at that rabbit and I'm like, damn, dumb. What are you doing? Like, you're going to get hurt, because he would just, especially being an indoor rabbit, I mean, I had a pit bull at the time. I had two pit bulls. And this rabbit did not give a damn. Like, it was just like if we'd get up and thump them in the face. And so I'm
Wow.
like, yeah. And so, I mean, of course, my dog showed incredible restraint, but that's when you think of harebrained ideas. Again, it's like maybe you're not making the wisest decisions, kind of just going with that innate
Yeah.
instinct to do whatever it is that they're going to do. So I thought that's just some sayings that I had pulled out that I was like, oh, now that I'm considering it, this is actually quite interesting how many sayings there are.
Yeah, there's a
Okay.
lot.
So I want to jump in before we go into like stories and stuff like that and considerations, cultural, religion, all of that stuff. I want to break down. I know we talked about with the falcon, we did it some, but I really want to talk about, make sure we hit on it with the rabbit. Physical characteristics, because you've already talking about like zigzagging, right? And you're already talking about the
Mhm.
ears. So I want to talk about what are some physical characteristics, or characteristics of the rabbit in general. It could be a behavior as well, that would help somebody understand symbolism perhaps in their life. Like if a rabbit showed up, which we'll get into that, but what are some things that we can take away from the rabbit itself?
Well, and I don't know if you consider this to go in the category of physical characteristics, but they are amazing jumpers. Oh, hello, Bowie. Uh, they're amazing jumpers. They can jump, and obviously they're small creatures, but they can jump 3 to 4 feet in one hop. And that's the equivalent of us jumping like 2 or 3 times our body height. That's, pretty astounding. So that's a pretty, I mean, if you think about making big leaps in your life,
That's what I was
making,
gonna say. Yeah,
mhm,
leaps and bounds, making
leaps and
big. Yeah,
bounds. Yes, making big choices to take a big chance and take a leap. They're also their ears, obviously. Hello to the ears. Their ears give them superior hearing, and they can even turn their ears 180 degrees. So they actually, I don't think I realized that they could actually rotate them to that degree. And that makes for, really keen hearing, which it's good because they need something in their toolkit because they are obviously a big source of prey to the
well,
predator
and their
animals.
their eyes are on the sides of their head as well, and they can see in front of them and behind them, which is, yeah, it's pretty interesting the way. I don't think I knew they could rotate their ears. I don't think I knew they could do it that much. But if you
I
think
didn't
about
either.
with the sight in front and behind and the ability to rotate the ears, it's literally like stopping and taking a 360-degree observation of what's happening around you.
Oh, I like that. That's a good one. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
I'm all about that.
I like that. They also, it's a little science fact for you. They eat their poop.
Ah,
And
yes,
that,
that's wonderful.
but this has
Yum.
meaning. Wait for it. It's a harder one to follow, but I believe it still has meaning. So that is called, if I'm going to say this right, coprophagy is any animal that eats their own feces.
I'm
That's what
sure it's
that's
not
called.
crapophagy.
Crapophagy. That's probably more apt. They eat their own poop, but that's because they're built to do so. Their digestive system actually will take that poop and suss out nutrients that they didn't quite absorb the first time around. So it actually is a healthy habit for them because of the way their digestive systems are built. In my mind, my symbolic mind goes to thinking about, okay, and I'm getting off on a tangent, but a lot of cultures saw rabbits as, can I also just call them bunnies sometimes? Because that just
Just
sounds cute.
rabbits, bunnies. Yeah, they're technically
Bunnies,
different, but yes.
bunnies. Rabbits, a lot of cultures saw rabbits as creatures that were associated with the underworld because they burrow underground. And what's that?
We're not talking about that yet.
No, I know, but that I'm
Okay.
linking that. We'll get to that more, but I'm linking that to the poop eating because if you think about eating your poop sounds really gross, but it's kind of like working with your shadow side, working with your darker side,
No,
working with your
no.
ickier side, and embracing your ickier side, which is like shadow work almost. No, you're not feeling me with this. You're not feeling me with
No.
the poop
Mm-mm.
analogy.
No. No.
There's just
Mm-mm.
no reason to eat poop ever.
No. No. I never saw Munch and Crunch Sir Lixa-Lot eat his poop, and
He probably
I
did it when
I
you weren't looking.
I'm relatively glad that I didn't, because he would have been outside and been coyote food probably pretty fast, because that's just disgusting. Ugh, that's gross. Especially it was Sir Licks a lot because he licked you constantly.
Oh, and
Like,
he
he
definitely
liked
was
to
eating
like,
his poop. Girl, he was eating his poop and licking you. I'm just letting you know. I know that's past tense, but
you're not
girl.
allowed to speak. No, that was almost 20 years ago. That's insane. Um, okay, what else you got for me besides poop eating?
On the science front, I also have that they are crepuscular. That means that they sleep most of the day and part of the night, but they are most active during dawn and dusk hours. And I love any animal that is crepuscular, like the wolf. The wolf is crepuscular because it's the liminal times. It's those liminal in between times that we all know is magical space. It's a magical in between time that when we're dusk going into nightfall, dawn going into sunrise. Those are the magical liminal spaces. So I just like it because it
Yeah,
gives it
it
a little bit
is.
of that magical vibe, you
And
know?
it's that transition. It's the ability to move in the shadows, which is kind of what magical practitioners do as a whole, especially in those that are familiar with the Western mystery tradition, you'll know the solar adorations. So that's very interesting. I love that because
Right.
you're in that liminal space between and working in the shadows. So I have a couple of things I wrote down with we kind of talked about like they're incredibly quick. They can change directions. And then one thing that I've always thought was really cool about them was they can freeze. Have you ever seen a rabbit just dead stop and they just don't move? Like they don't
Yes.
blink, they don't anything. They're just there and you're kind of looking at them like, wow. And it's even in the midst of all the chaos and rapid movement, they can just freeze on a dime. So it goes back to that, being able to move, to pivot, to take that zigzag instead of that straight course, but also knowing when to just stop, be silent, be still, and don't flinch. I
Well,
love
also
that.
when to be unseen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's a need sometimes to be quiet and observe and not be the one that's drawing a lot of attention to yourself. I mean, that's a superpower in itself to be able to go
Yeah,
into
absolutely.
harness that energy, go into a crowded room, be super still, quiet, and observe. You'll hear a lot more if people
So
don't know you're there.
I know we were just had your class at the International Divination event, and you were discussing superpowers and the tarot. And what was the card that was associated with that? The ability to freeze time
That was
or
in
to
my
be
mind.
unseen.
To be unseen, I think it was the hermit, because in my mind the hermit is invisibility, because the hermit is cloaked and the hermit
Yeah.
is on this isolated mountainscape in the tarot traditionally. And so I equated that on a superhero front with the power of invisibility. And that's where
I
we
like
talked
that.
about, that is a power that you can harness even in our human bodies. Obviously, we'll still be able to see people, but when you go unnoticed because you're quiet and you're observing, you can, and you think about the rabbit's power of hearing, it's with those awesome ears, you can hear some stuff maybe you weren't supposed to hear, especially in a crowded
Like that.
situation, especially in a large party or grouping. You might get some insider scoop.
So what I hear from you is that with the next tarot deck you release, that the hermit is going to have rabbit ears on. That's what I
Oh,
hear.
I like that. Why not?
Or give him a little fluffy tail. How about that?
I love it.
Random fluffy tail. Okay, so the other thing I had that a lot of people don't typically associate with rabbits is they have insanely sharp teeth and claws.
Do they?
If you Oh, yeah, they will rip you to shreds. So, obviously, the bigger the bunny, the sharper and the longer the claws and the teeth. Yes, because I told you I had another rabbit when I was a teenager, that was he was aggressive. I mean, he was basically feral, and if he bit into I mean, it was not just drawing blood. I mean, we're talking about straight puncture wounds and dripping with blood because he'd tear into you. So when you look at a bunny, you often don't consider bunny rabbit hair the fact that they also have incredible defense mechanisms because you just see the
Yeah.
fluffiness and the softness and all the warm fuzzies, but you also don't see that if it wants to hurt you, it's going to tear you up. Have you ever
Yeah.
seen two rabbits box? Have you ever seen them
Yes, I
box?
think you
Yes.
sent me that video the other day, which I had seen something like that before, but
Oh yeah.
it's still adorable. But they are aggressive though. I mean, they
Oh
get
yeah.
up on their hind legs and they just do. They just
Yeah.
box right at it. but it's
Yeah.
still adorable.
And try and pick one up in the wild and see what happens. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of those that, again, because of them being domesticated and people associating, even in the wild where they're not domesticated, they think, oh, it's a soft bunny. And oftentimes they will, well, I can't talk, will just bail, right? They'll just get out of Dodge.
Yeah.
If you grab one, trap one, do any of this, you're going to get hurt. So I think
Right.
it's also the interesting perspective of, knowing when to have your softer side and when to bail, like when a situation calls for you to get out, but also when to let the teeth and the claws come out and be
Yes.
defensive.
Especially for somebody being bullied.
Oh,
That's what it
yeah,
made me think of.
absolutely.
Somebody who's being picked on, but a bully is usually suggestive of somebody that's either in a position of power or is bigger and larger. And you think about the little bitty cute bunny being, basically having to have these skills to survive against bigger animals, bigger threats, or even just bigger bunnies. And,
Right.
so, and you think about
Bigger
that, and it's like,
bunnies.
you don't have to be somebody who's super powerful or super large to fight back.
I like that. Okay, so speaking of fighting back, I'm going to kind of move off of it is part of the physical characteristics, but it's one that is kind of going to move us into more of the stories and the allegories and all of that. And many of the listeners don't know, many people who are associated with me on the surface level don't know this, but anybody that knows me well knows that I have studied Nazi Germany and World War II for as long as I can remember. There's something about it that I've always felt compelled to study. And if it's a documentary, I watch it if I can get my hands on it to read it. I mean, it's just something that I've always been ingrained with learning about. And so one of the things that I always, I don't know how old I was when I learned this. I mean, I was probably in grade school. Um, maybe I don't remember. I mean, I was young, I'll say that. But they used rabbit's blood to help get Jewish victims out of Nazi Germany because the rabbit blood would throw off the scent for the dogs that were tracking them in the bottoms of boats and stuff.
Oh, wow.
So I've always thought that was pretty cool. Like that was one that I was like, heck yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, to be able to use rabbit's blood to detract these dogs to allow these victims to get away was
Yeah.
incredible. So that's always something that stuck out with me with the rabbit was
Yeah.
what a significant role to play in the history of mankind for an
Oh my
animal.
gosh, that really kind of gave me chills almost. That's beautiful that I mean, obviously there's so much tragedy that comes out of it, but that's still beautiful that some people survived due to that because they were able to use, and that goes back to that rabbit's power of trickery,
Yeah.
using the
Yeah.
blood to throw them off the scent. So it's powerful, but it also still reinforces a lot of the symbolic meanings.
Well, and if you consider that the rabbit is seen as life can only occur through death and renewal, the
Oh
rabbit
yeah.
had to
Yeah.
die in
Mhm.
order to help save lives.
Right.
Is that, I mean, it's pretty powerful when you think of just the implications of what this animal and the sacrifice it made
Yeah.
played into literally salvation for others.
Right. Right. That's
So
beautiful.
I am gonna throw at you then, another thing because I went on this that is kind of where I started, and then I went down this, like,
Rabbit hole.
rabbit hole. Rabbit hole. I went down this rabbit hole that was literally talking about that the rabbit is the intercessor between this world and the next, and that it is seen as a sacrificial animal in many cultures for salvation of others.
Oh wow.
Did you find anything on that?
Not really. I mean, I found evidence of other ways that I guess you could say rabbits were sacrificed, which we can talk about, but it doesn't feel like it was as profound as what you're saying. So I want to hear
Okay.
more.
Okay. So do you want to go into that now or do you want to go into it?
No, I want to hear
Okay.
what you're going with
So
this.
there were several that I kind of came into. One of the biggest ones is, and this is I'm gonna backtrack off these notes real quick. So if you are familiar with, so I like all the weird old things, right?
I do.
So
Yeah.
um So it kind of went with in early Christian manuscripts, right? And this isn't where it started, but this is when I'm gonna roll backwards some of it
Sure.
because this is kind of something I want to talk about at the end, but we're gonna go back.
Okay.
So in early Christian manuscripts, rabbits were often depicted with the baby Jesus, with the adult Jesus, or with the Holy Family, because it was a symbol of purity and
White rabbits
wholeness, right?
specifically,
Yes,
right? White rabbits.
yes, white rabbit specifically. But it was also seen as rabbits were a symbol of a God-fearing man that trusted in God over his fellow man, despite what was going on at the time. And so it had literally this notion of like being sacrificing the self to God, but also that association with Jesus who sacrificed and was put on the cross and for sin and the whole story, which I'm gonna go down.
Right.
But do you know what the drolleries are?
No.
Oh, I love the drolleries. The drolleries are amazing. Anybody that doesn't know what a drollery is, we need to make sure to put this on the Instagram and the Facebook.
Sure.
Because the drolleries came out in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance era. And so they were literally like comedic reliefs that are in response to early Christian manuscripts and teachings and stuff like that. And so because in the earlier teachings, the rabbit was again that Christ-like sacrificial, trusting in God over man and purity and wholeness. In the drolleries, all the rabbits are depicted like decapitating people, killing people with knives, with battle axes. Like it is absolutely, if you can go look at the drolleries, because they take all the symbols that are associated with the church,
Right.
and they basically like show it for what it is, for to put it as simply as possible and as nicely as
Yeah.
possible. But it's hilarious. The drolleries that's what they were intended for. They were comedic relief intended
Yeah.
to kind of mock this, you're saying you're this, but this is what's really happening in our day and age.
Right.
So that was one of the stories again that goes back to like that sacrificial thing. And then it was interesting that it got turned around in the Middle Ages, which we'll go into that more because I do have more on that in the change.
Oh,
Okay,
good.
so some of
How
the
very droll.
so yes, the drolleries, they're hilarious. Um, but one of the things, sorry, all my notes are all over the place. So some of the other stories that I came across that were talking about this sacrificial self, right, was, and then you might have this, so stop me. In India, the Buddha reincarnated or incarnated as the hare, and he leapt into the fire for
Oh, yeah.
self-sacrifice to be food for Brahma.
Right. I did
And
read that one. That's a
did you?
lovely one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then in um, so Minabuk, who's the great hare of the Algonquins, the Sioux, and I don't know how to say this, Ojibwa, I believe it's something like that.
Ojibwe.
Yes. I heard it. I looked up like how to pronounce it online, but I don't remember. Anyways, that he came to Earth as the hare and taught skills. He fought monsters. He did all of these things.
Mhm.
And then he helped repopulate after the Great Flood. And so it's again that like God-like, Christ-like play between, sacrificing the self for the good of the all. And then I'm gonna wait on that one because I'm really excited about that. Do you have any on them? Did you find any sacrificial stories? Did you find sacrifices? I hate sacrifices.
No, I don't have as many sacrificial stories as you do.
Okay, so then we're gonna talk about your rabbit eating friends. But first I want to talk about okay, so Shiite Muslims. A lot of people don't realize that there are different sects of Muslims, right? Muslim beliefs is Islam. So Shiite Muslims, it is taboo to eat them because they are considered a reincarnation of Ali, who is considered to be the true, uh, what is the actual word? True intercessor between Allah and true believers. That's
Okay.
their belief system. But what's interesting is because you were talking about your friends who breed rabbits for meat. Eating rabbit is actually like a mortal sin in many places of the world because of their symbolism. So
Oh,
it's not just the Shia Muslims, but the Celts, the entire Baltic region, Asia, China. There's like huge, vast areas where to consume a rabbit is to like commit a mortal sin. So
interesting. I'll have to tell
your
her
friend,
that because I every time she calls them meat rabbits, I'm like, but what are their names? She's like, meat rabbit.
be like,
Which,
look,
by the way, they have an amazing setup. So their life is very good. They have a huge outdoor like pen setup that where they burrow, and they have so they're very well taken care of. They're very.
where is this? What state is this?
This is in Colorado.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah.
thought you were gonna say Louisiana. I was about to say, well, that would make a lot of sense. Because the South, they eat, yeah.
No,
I mean, down
they
here.
have a whole urban farm that's amazing. So they've got it all. But yeah, the meat rabbits. I'm like, meat rabbits.
I'm glad to say that because my dad was a country boy. And
Uh-huh.
so as far as I'm going to say with the preface of as far as I know, I've never had rabbit.
Oh
But
yeah, as
that
far
man
as
would
you
tell me
know.
all kinds as far as I know, I've never had rabbit. I'm not
Yeah.
interested in eating rabbit. It no. Ugh. Okay. So the last sacrificial story that I have is, I'm obsessed with Egypt. Like I
Oh
just
girl,
love
me
Egypt.
too. Yeah,
So you know the story of Osiris. Well, actually, I'm gonna just kind of recant it for those who may not know.
sure.
So Osiris was slain, and in his being slain, he was able to, and this kind of goes to the Lion's Gate that's in August, is what they call it,
Right.
the Lion's Gate portal. And it's the ancient Egyptian New Year. But in his being slain and his body parts being thrown into the Nile, he was able to provide fertility because that's when the Nile would rise, which would then, provide nourishment to the land and the land would, reproduce. And so in ancient Egypt, they believed that rabbits possess the secret elements of life. And so I've always thought that was fascinating because most people don't associate rabbits or hares with Egypt. Anything, I
No.
mean, that's not one you would normally consider. So it's interesting because what they will do is they will, Osiris was depicted in a hare's clothing being torn
Right.
apart and his body parts being thrown into the water. So this goes back to that sacrificial but yet fertility. Through death comes renewed life. So they will actually hair up a hare, make a hare that's supposed to embody Osiris and throw it into the Nile
Right.
as a ritual thing
Well,
yearly.
yeah, and there was the goddess that I had no idea about this until I started researching. I didn't know there was a hair goddess.
Yes,
That's
there's
kind of
multiple. Yeah.
Osiris's counterpart in this rabbit energy of this Egyptian story. Unut or Wenut, I guess was her name.
Mhm.
And so I didn't because we know that they what did they have like a couple thousand deities I think in the pantheon. But
Yeah.
but so they probably hit on every animal, but I never knew there was a hare-headed goddess
Mhm.
specifically. So I think that's all fascinating
And
because
she comes from, and it's pronounced a couple different ways.
okay.
Um, but Istra,
Hmm.
I've heard it said numerous different ways. I
Right.
try and go by what the region says. Um, but that's where she came from, was the Egyptian goddess was, because they borrow from each other's pantheons, they
Right.
give them a new
Inspired by.
name. Yes.
Right.
But that's, yeah, so that's where you're talking about the earlier cultures. That's where she came from, and that's where Easter came from.
Right.
Like the
Right.
Easter that we celebrate with the rabbits, the rabbits your kids go and visit, stuff like that. That's where that
The
all comes from.
bunny.
Yeah, the bunny and the eggs.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that that's absolutely fascinating because
Yeah.
I had heard the stories of because of course it's sympathetic magic is what they call it, like, and so you're creating, tearing apart this hair and throwing it into the river to represent Osiris and giving fertility back to the land through death and life. But then you have her as well, and a lot of people don't realize that these two are not the only. Osiris is not the only god, and she, obviously you have her and two counterparts, but not the only goddesses. um who else do you have? Because I got some gods and goddesses we could talk about.
Well, I was more going to segue because if we're going to talk about fertility as an energy for the bunny, there's lots more on fertility in general, but it's not so much God. My notes aren't so much God or goddess centric. So I don't know if this is a good segue to
go
dive into that
what
fertility.
you got.
So first and foremost, going a little bit back to science. I mean, okay, I don't know if we've decided whether we're going to cuss on this show or not, so I'll use a more delicate word.
Relatively PG-13.
We're going to keep it classy, y'all. So you probably all heard the expression blank like rabbits.
Yes.
So they are known for their prolific procreation habits. And when I dug in, we all know this, but when I dug into like what they're actually able to do fertility wise, it's pretty astounding. So a single rabbit can make anywhere from 5 to 12 babies called kits in one litter. And it only takes about a month for gestation period. So it's a relatively short time to make these babies in the belly, the womb, and spit them out. The female rabbit can then become pregnant again mere hours after giving birth, which I was a little bit horrified for. Like, a little bit like, bunny, because that doesn't sound very fun. But hey, that's apparently what can happen when they're all together. So literally, she might literally become pregnant again within hours of giving birth. And even though there is a more fertile period of the seasons, rabbits are known to still mate year round. Probably more so in that very, the more springtime season and stuff, but they are known to mate year round. So I did that math on what one bunny could possibly produce. And one bunny could be responsible for 144 fresh babies in 1 year. So again, that fertile energy is there's a good reason why they're associated with fertility. Also, on a sadder note, many people who know the expression, the rabbit died. Have you ever heard that expression? It's really more from, you've never heard that? No. I think I heard it in Greece, not Greece, the country, Greece, the movie, Greece, the musical.
I know the movie, but I have no idea what you're talking about.
So when you hear people say it's definitely more of a 40s and 50s, 1940s and 50s era thing, but when you'd hear the rabbit died, that was the original for pregnancy test. They would actually inject a woman's urine into a rabbit, and if the rabbit died, it meant she was pregnant. So obviously it's really sad because a lot of bunnies died until they had a more modern version of this test. Eventually they learned scientifically that you could actually use frogs instead, and the frogs wouldn't die. They would actually spit out eggs as a result if the woman was pregnant from so they found a better way to do it that didn't just kill. But I think that's interesting just because it keeps reinforcing that fertility energy. I mean, the rabbit was literally a pregnancy test. And again,
it goes back to that. You said if they were pregnant, then the rabbit would die, correct?
That's correct.
Again, it goes back through death comes renewal or life. To see, it's very interesting.
Sacrificial energy that I had, a little bit of sacrificial energy there. Yeah.
These poor rabbits are being taken out left and right.
Oh, right.
So it kind of goes, it's not completely fertility related, but Aphrodite is associated with the rabbit. And I mean,
well, she's associated with sexy time.
Yeah, she's sexy time. And that's what I'm thinking, sexy time. And so you think about that, so that was one of the ones that I definitely had on there. I was like, oh yeah, you got Aphrodite and sexy time. So
sexy time.
That's in that fertility realm.
Right.
What else you got for me?
Well, this would be kind of segueing or transitioning into the rabbit as a symbol of luck. But if you want to go back to some of your gods and goddesses, we can go back to that luck later. I'm curious to hear more about some of your god and goddess energy.
Really the only thing I had, I think, left on here, because I got stuff all over the place. But I know they're associated with, and again, Hecate or Hecate. Hecate is how I say it, but I don't know if that's actually correct. But rabbits being a symbol of protection of children, and witchcraft is what she's associated with. And so it kind of segues into the luck thing, because while she is a goddess that is associated with those things, rabbits are associated with witches and being lucky versus unlucky, depending on where you are.
Yes. And I have a whole story about that one. That's pretty macabre.
Let's do it. Tell me about it. Give me your macabre.
I'm going to get into the macabre, y'all. So most people are very familiar with the idea of a lucky rabbit's foot. They still sell them. I mean, most of them I think are now plastic and fake fur, thankfully. But they do still sell them. But most people are very familiar with that being a talisman that used worldwide as a symbol of luck. So there's a couple different versions of where this actually originated. And there is some witch energy in there. But first, we have to go back to the Middle Ages, where public hangings were very regular. Public executions were obviously daily. And they would leave often the corpses of somebody who had been executed in the village squares as kind of a deterrent of like, look what could happen if you are naughty. And they would just leave these corpses there. And it became somewhere along the way a superstition that if you owned the left hand of a corpse that had been executed, of a criminal, it was lucky. So people would go and cut off the left hand. It was called the hand of glory, and they'd pickle it, yum, and save it. And it was really a prized thing back then. So that's one of the places they think the rabbit's foot eventually kind of morphed from, as being a lucky talisman, because it also is said that it has to be the left foot of the rabbit. So there's something about this left-handed left foot of the rabbit. Then there was, in the 1800s, a belief that witches would take the form of rabbits and shapeshift. And
That was big in Scotland.
Right. And
Yeah.
obviously there was
In Europe in general.
years and years of the witch, the witch hunts and such, and a lot of innocent people being killed. But they also, since there was a long held belief that witches would shapeshift into rabbits, that same belief that of lucky rabbit foot energy was they would sometimes kill a rabbit, or even, very sadly, sorry, I guess trigger warning in case somebody doesn't want to hear about abuse of animals, but sometimes they would even sever the foot while the rabbit was live. And in the belief that they might have caught a witch, and they might have just gotten a witch's foot, essentially, because it seemed to be, the belief was, the more wicked that somebody believed somebody to be, whether it was a criminal or whether it was a witch. Obviously, I'm not calling witches wicked. I'm saying that was a belief in some of the fear mongering. But the belief was, the more wicked the entity, the more power there was in that talisman. So rabbit's feet were very common back then too. Then it eventually became, there's some belief that it came also from some hoodoo practices. And that kind of came to where we've been talking about going, New Orleans. And there was white rampant selling of rabbit's feet in New Orleans. There probably still is, but there was, what I found fascinating was there are so many.
Is it so? Are you finding it in hoodoo or voodoo or both? They are different.
I found hoodoo specifically referenced. Okay. And again, this is from research. I'm not claiming that this is absolute fact, because I don't know much about hoodoo, but that's what I found.
We don't know anything.
Right.
We just write things down.
Right. And so I did find hoodoo, not voodoo, hoodoo referenced multiple times when it came to this. And the belief was, their belief in the hoodoo system was more about that fertility energy, that it was good luck to carry a lucky rabbit's foot, because it gave you that fertile energy. So it was less about having this wickedness around that being where the power came from. But what I found interesting was, there was a whole description of what had to be done to get the luck. And this is coming more out of New Orleans in the late 1800s. And there was an article that said it was believed that it had to be the left hind foot. The rabbit had been captured or killed in a cemetery, and it needed to be cut off on a very specific day, usually a Friday, and sometimes even with very specific weather conditions. So there was a lot of lore around how this rabbit's foot was acquired, and if it was acquired in the right conditions to make it magical. Obviously, all that's been lost in modern days, and now it's just this rampant, cute little dyed hot pink little things that are keychains. So it's
you said left foot on a Friday
in a cemetery, killed or caught in a cemetery. Then there was even some specifics about the person who killed him had to be cross-eyed. I'm not sure why. That was one thing I found with the person that did the killing. The practitioner had to be cross-eyed. I'm not sure if that one's as accurate. That was an interesting one. But I just thought it was really interesting. This all came down from both the hand of glory from the Middle Ages and then the belief around the witches. And there was even a really famous one. Our president, Grover Cleveland, was said to have a foot of a rabbit that was killed on the grave of Jesse James. And
Huh.
he carried that rabbit's foot when he was running for president. And again, he became president. So there are some really interesting, real people who believed in this lore.
We're gonna have to do another episode on the rabbit because my brain
Right?
just started deciphering all the things you're talking about. Okay,
About
so
left and Friday
yeah,
and all
so
that
I'm gonna
energy.
hit,
Yep.
yeah, so like I'm gonna hit some stuff on it. So I can tell you,
Get it.
so the hand of glory, right? So the left hand,
Uh-huh.
hand of glory. Also during the Middle Ages, you have ritual high magicians, right? So high magic. You think of people like John Dee. Rabbits have been a sacred animal to those in ritual high magic for centuries. So people think of cats, they think of snakes, they think of certain birds, but rabbits are in those as well because these animals have an electromagnetic frequency that we don't see in other animals. That's why you have
Whoa.
the association with cats and snakes, and you have that cross reference between owls and ravens or crows. But there are a few animals, and rabbit is one of those. So then you take into consideration the left hand, right? So what is typically the receptive hand for a magical practitioner?
That's right. The left. You
The
receive
left
with the
hand.
left. That's
You
right.
receive with the left. And so
Mhm.
also at that same hand, you've got the whole, I'm not here to argue left hand versus right hand path. That's not what I'm here to do. We're not talking about that. But there is a difference between the left hand path and the right hand path. The left being divinely associated, guided for the greater good of humanity, etc., and the right being more of a for myself, that sort of thing. And that's where you get the difference between, and I'm in air quotations, magical divine practitioners, light workers versus shadow workers, dark workers. And that's where you also get the side of like the satanic temple and stuff like that.
Right.
Not that they're necessarily worshiping Satan, it's the right hand path. So it's interesting to me when you're talking about the left foot of a rabbit in the Middle Ages, the hand
Uh-huh.
of glory, which is also the left hand is significant, especially when you consider why were those people being killed? And were they being killed for speaking out against the church, for whatever the case may be? I'm wondering if the left hand of one of those people executed would have been more valuable than, say, somebody who caught stealing who was executed.
That's really interesting. That also goes back to sacrificial energy.
That's, yeah, that's,
Sacrifice for
see,
the greater good to make people
but
fall in line and believe and to not talk out and make sure they're doing what they're supposed to do according to the
yeah.
church.
So to take somebody, the left hand of a perhaps a magical practitioner, somebody speaking out against the church, etc.
Right.
Then, okay, so here I'm going to break down. So I do know of rabbits use, and I'm not a hoodoo practitioner. I am not a voodoo
Right.
practitioner. I am in no means an expert, but I do have friends that practice both of those. Um, and a lot of people don't realize that it's African and Haitian magic mixed with Christianity teachings that came about as a product of slavery. A lot of people don't know
Right.
that. And so when you look at Africa, and I think you know this. So my major area of study in grad school, my area, so yes, I do it a lot of different things, but Africa is my primary area of focus. I love Africa. I felt called to it since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
Um, so matter of fact, amongst all my books over there, there's a children's, it's on us. And that's been a favorite of mine for as long as I can remember. But anyways, in African, through African, as well as African American magic, the rabbit is significant for a variety of things. And so again, it goes back to that left foot of the rabbit.
Uh-huh.
Then you take into account Friday, which according to different traditions is associated with different gods. I don't know what god or goddess is associated with Fridays. I would be interested to see for hoodoo and voodoo practitioners and their belief systems. But I know in the Western mystery tradition, Friday is Venus's day, which is associated with Aphrodite. So you
Which is
have
back to
that.
sexy time magic.
Yes, see, and so it's getting like that, all that synchronicity. And then again, you have the cemetery. So you have that death aspect, that
Mhm.
renewal, that entombment. And then it's so interesting. You said cross-eyed, and as soon as you said cross-eyed, I was like, bingo. Like I don't know what the hoodoo or voodoo association is with cross-eyed. But cross-eyed people are actually considered magical in many places in the world because they can see interdimensionally. They
Okay,
can
that just blew my
see.
mind. I have never heard that, and
So
I'm like,
I
whoa.
yeah, I don't know if that's the hoodoo voodoo side of it. It may have
Yeah,
nothing to do with that, but cross-eyed, six fingers, there are certain things that we would consider physical deformities that in other
right.
places of the world indicates a reincarnated being, a god, a goddess, some magical being having magical properties, abilities, whatever. And cross-eyed is one of those. They consider it somebody that can see interdimensionally, two places at one time.
That is so crazy because, like I was saying to you, I'm like, I don't know what that's about, but they said cross-eyed, and you're like, I know what that's about. I'm like, oh
I
my
I don't
gosh, I
know.
love
I
that. No,
don't, but again,
well, I
I
love
don't
that
know if
there
that's
might be a
right.
reason that actually has
Yeah,
basis, and it just gives me chills. I'm like, oh, that actually is
telling you.
really
We
interesting.
might have to be doing some more
I
episode on
mean,
a
there's
rabbit
a
because this
lot
is
about
like,
rabbit.
yeah, this is a lot. So I
Yeah.
have, what else do you have? What else you got for me?
Oh my goodness. Well, I've got some modern day Playboy bunny stuff. I've got
Oh, well, we're talking about sexy time with Aphrodite and Venus. So what you got?
yeah, I don't know if this is very sexy. It's actually kind of gross.
Oh,
Um okay, I'm not gonna I
well, you
guess
are kind of looking bunny like. You got a little tail on Jen. You
no,
got
I
your ears on.
don't. Um no, this is not any judgment on Playboy bunnies. That's cool. That's awesome. It's the
You
Hugh
do
Hefner.
you.
I am going to judge Hugh Hefner though. So if you're a Hugh Hefner fan, I guess look away. I, it's kind of vile if you ask me. Anyway, so obviously we all know what Playboy bunnies are. I believe most people know that. Very huge
You have to
enterprise.
say, give a little snippet just in case if people don't know what a
Just in
Playboy bunny.
case. That's right. Just in case. In the 1960s in America, there was a gentleman named Hugh Hefner, and he started a magazine called Playboy, which is, kind of an adult magazine. It's got beautiful women that are, mostly naked. I think sometimes partially naked. Naked. See, there's my southernness coming out.
Naked.
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 It's not naked, it's naked. And he also had clubs, so this became a huge enterprise, very big money making enterprise, because there was the magazine that was very popular. There was also many clubs, Playboy clubs, where there are women as waitresses, dressed kind of like little, I believe, leotards with like cute bunny tails and bunny ears and little bow ties. So they had a signature costume. He also had a mansion where he had all these very lavish parties and kept, I believe, at any given time, usually there were women who lived there that had kind of made it to the upper echelons of the Playboy bunny world. And I'm not going to get into what may or may not have gone down in the Hugh Hefner mansion. I'm just going to go back to this quote from an interview he did. So there's obviously a lot of people would assume, why did he choose the bunny as a symbol for this enterprise? Which is obviously meant to be a
Well,
sexy kind of enterprise.
yeah, I would say that's what I would think of because the
Yeah,
fertility and the
right. That's
Venus Aphrodite association. Yeah.
absolutely. We would have thought it was maybe kind of all that fertility, kind of sexy energy. He was given an interview, and this is what he said. He said, "The rabbit, the bunny in America has a sexual meaning, and I chose it because it's a fresh animal, shy, vivacious, jumping, sexy. First it smells you, then it escapes, then it comes back, and you feel like caressing it, playing with it." I found that really vile personally because it feels very predatorial to me.
Yeah. Hmm.
It's like, ooh, you get to chase it and catch it and caress it and keep it like against, it sounds very non-consensual in some ways. There's some icky undertones if you ask me. So it wasn't just about the fertility symbolism. It was about fresh little creatures that you could chase after and catch. The only reason I even brought it up is because with the bunny being a symbol of prey, I guess you can take it back to the predatorial nature that is sometimes involved with
Yeah.
sexuality. And that to me is a good illustration of a predatorial nature. And when it
Because
comes
they're
to
often
women,
associated with innocence and gentleness and stuff like that. That I have not seen any of the documentaries, but I do know they have put out numerous documentaries or shows or whatever on former Playboy bunnies talking about it. And I remember this like in the 90s or early 2000s, there was a show on
Yes.
the girls that were bunnies that lived with him or whatever.
Right.
Never watched that because I don't watch reality TV. But my point is that I just remember thinking like it seemed very predatory back then as a
Yes.
teenager, even. I was like, this is hmm, not no. Hmm,
Yeah, and
yeah.
by the way, this is just to make it super clear. I am not making any judgment on anybody who wants to work in the sex industry in any capacity. I honestly don't have any
It's the
problem with
choice of
that.
words.
It's the
Yeah.
way, it's the predatorial energy around this particular enterprise and his words
Well,
that I'm
and if you
focusing on. I'm not
and if
focusing
you
on anybody who wants to do any of that. That's awesome. Go for it.
And if you flip the script, because I was about to say, I mean, you also have the other side of that. You have the bunny ranch that's in
Right.
Vegas. And
Mhm.
so I've never been to the bunny ranch, but, and I don't know too terribly much about it, but my understanding is the women have far more control of
Yes.
themselves, their bodies, what clients they see or don't see. And if you're not familiar with the bunny ranch, so sex work is legal in,
I
is
believe
it
in all
all
of
of
Nevada.
is it all Nevada? Okay, I didn't know
I
if it was just
believe
Vegas or
so.
if it was all of Nevada. But the Bunny Ranch is literally like a sex house, a sex brothel. What I don't know what the correct politically correct term is.
Sure.
I say brothel because that's what I know them as. But the women have much more control over there. Do you know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
they get to decide what clients they want and how they want to, what they want to do and how they want to do it. So it's interesting. It's not necessarily, it's not about the anti-sex thing. It's his choice of words. To me, it's why he chose the bunny symbol. If he would have just said, yeah, because it's sexy and fertility and, vivacious and flirtatious or whatever, I would have been like, well, that makes sense. But to kind
Right.
of spin it in that way, it's very much a predatory thing, especially like I said, the documentaries that have been coming out talking about the abuses that went on at the Playboy Bunny mansion. So
Yes.
that's
Yes.
that's
And
the other side because there was a lot of abuse that's subsequently come out, as my understanding.
yeah, that's what I've heard hints of that as well. And the Bunny Ranch to me is a great, I showing the contrast because I saw a documentary actually about the Bunny Ranch years ago,
I
and
did too. It's been like 10 years
yeah,
ago or
but
something.
I remember that too. That was the takeaway, that there is a lot more empowerment in that
Yeah.
situation because they're empowered to make choices around their body and who they want to work with and who they don't as clients. And even just their stake in the money, I believe, is much different.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
it is a very different, and it's a fine line, but that's a very different energy. He actually went on in this interview to say a little bit more. He said, just to show how icky I believe it is, to give you the full ick factor. He says, consider the kind of girl that we made popular, the Playmate of the Month. She is never sophisticated, a girl you cannot really have. She is a young, healthy, simple girl. The girl next door. We are not interested in the mysterious, difficult woman. The femme fatale, who wears elegant underwear with lace, and she is sad and somehow mentally filthy. The Playboy girl has no lace, no underwear. She is naked, well washed with soap and water, and she is happy. So I just might vomited in my mouth a little bit
Wow.
because
It's a good thing. I
ick,
would have throat punched this
ick.
man. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
rabbit
absurd.
punch. Did you know there's an actual
No.
type of punch called a
Yes.
rabbit punch?
I didn't know that, but I mean, I've seen the rabbits boxing.
Rabbit
Yeah, like it's
punch.
a good thing. I would probably have throat punched this man and gone to
Yeah.
jail
Yeah.
gladly. That
So
is
that says a lot about what he thought of women in general. Simple
well, and
creatures.
so and we were talking about, and I'm going to spin it real quick, because it kind of ties back. We're going to go backwards again. When I was saying when we're talking about the Middle Ages, a lot of people don't realize that rabbits were sacred symbols for so many different cultures throughout the world. I had two of the ones I also didn't talk about was the Taoist. The rabbit is the maker of medicine of immortality. They literally depict rabbits making the medicine of immortality. The Chinese use the gall of a rabbit when they are smelting blades so that it has strength, durability, and longevity. And so those were two just fun facts that kind of got lost in translation of going through this. But this was one of the things when I was talking about the drolleries and the early Christian manuscripts. Rabbits were seen as these, divine, again, um, pure, they were literally worshipped throughout the world. And then the church came in, and it was actually in Deuteronomy and Leviticus that they damned the rabbits as unclean animals that had, you know, a soul that was tainted. And at that point, they also, because a lot of people know about pigs, but rabbits are also deemed as unclean animals by the church, that you're not supposed to eat rabbit.
Right.
And so it was at that same time, which is why you get the drolleries coming out, that the rabbit really took on. It had the feminine symbol through all these different cultures, but for the church, it really went from male to female during this time. And that's when they started associating the rabbit with females and the lunar principle. The church did. Other
Right.
cultures had already done that. Does that make sense?
It
And so
does. Yeah.
that's when you'll start seeing art, of course, because we love art, but you'll
Yes.
start seeing the differences in the rabbits depicted in other places in the world versus in early Christian works, to now it's really starting to change, and we're associating it with the unclean female and the lunar principle, because of course you have the solar male principle of Jesus, of God. And so the rabbit became the lunar feminine principle, the opposite. So it's very interesting to me the way that, because of course the church wanted to also kill sexuality, which is
Oh,
why,
yes.
yeah. So it was all of those things kind of at one time. It's where we see a really big swoop into not necessarily the change of it, but the acceptance of it. Does that make sense? Like
Yes.
it was, yeah. So his words are disgusting.
Yep.
He's probably a damn. I said damn, sorry. I was
Ooh,
gonna
did you
say he's
say damn,
I said
girl?
damn. I was gonna say he's probably a damn pope reincarnated or something, the way that he's talking, like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Randy went off on a tangent. That
Oh,
tends to
girl,
happen.
we could definitely go there. I feel you.
But I do want to talk about, if you don't have anything else,
I have one last little
what
snippet,
do
but
you
I'm going
got?
to save everything because it's a happy thing, and I want to end on a really lighthearted note. And it's
I want to talk
small.
about the moon. I want to talk
Yes,
about the moon. This
go
is because
for it.
there's so much on the moon.
Yes.
Okay, so the rabbit itself, especially again in symbolism, when you're looking at particularly classical art or depictions throughout the world, the rabbit is often associated with the moon.
Hmm.
Specifically, not just that lunar female principle that we're talking about, that this church kind of said, okay, yeah, it's really this and it's dirty. But it is a symbol for the moon itself and everything that goes on. Because we talked about, what was the term you used between dawn and dusk? This breaking time.
Crepuscular, I believe is the word.
Okay.
Crepuscular.
So it's in that, in the moon's powers, the manifestation powers, that in between, that liminal spaces, those gateways, those doors, those shadows. I know you had, at one point you had mentioned something, and I don't know if it's on this episode that we were going to talk about, but the Aztecs
Oh, yes, the
believe.
Aztec god. Yes.
Yes. Okay. What you got? What you got?
I'm going to probably butcher the way I actually looked for a pronunciation and could
Oh,
not
I did
find
not
one.
even. I did not. I didn't even try. I'm just going to say an Aztec god. I am not even going to try and pronounce that. That's
Yeah,
not happening.
I'll give it a shot. Omatachali. I probably butchered that. So forgive me, please. But it was the Aztec god of fertility. And his name literally meant two rabbits. And what I thought was really cute about that is he's also the god of drunkenness. So there was a very specific type of alcoholic drink that they used to drink. I think it's called pulque, the Aztecs. And so not only was he the god of fertility, he was also the god of drunkenness. And all I could think was, well, we all know people that maybe fertility and drunkenness go.
I was about to say, you get drunk and you like a rabbit. Yeah.
Sometimes that happens, and babies get made with a little help from alcohol.
Okay. So I had from the Aztecs that the god, I don't know if it's that particular Aztec god or another one, but that he hurled, and it was a god, not a goddess, hurled a rabbit at the moon, and it
Oh,
left the imprint of a rabbit on the moon. That's why people see the rabbit on the moon. The Aztecs said that he
oh,
threw it at it. And it's interesting is because the Mayans are very close and say that there is a blue bunny or a blue bunny imprint on the moon. So
that's
an indentation.
interesting.
Yeah. That was pretty fascinating to me.
I saw something else that wasn't related to the Aztecs or Mayans, and I don't remember which culture it was now, but it was a similar idea, but not so much that it got thrown at the moon, but that they saw all those kind of shadows and different kind of, we see all the different colorations kind of even from our
Yeah,
naked
yeah.
eye of the moon, that it looked like a rabbit had zigzagged hopped all over the moon. And so so again, kind of seeing that almost like those were the tracks made by a zigzaggy hopping all the way around moon,
Well, let me ask
rabbit.
you, when you look at the moon, do you see a rabbit on the moon, Jen?
I don't think of a rabbit on the moon, but I definitely think of rabbits as lunar creatures, but I
Do
don't
you want to
necessarily
know
see
what
it.
I've always thought it looks
Yeah,
like?
I do.
I thought it looks like a shrimp.
A shrimp?
Yes, I know how much you love shrimp.
I hate shrimping.
But I've always thought it looks like a shrimp. I don't know why. It looks like an upside down shrimp to me. It doesn't look like a rabbit.
Were we
But maybe
talking
it's
about how you didn't know what shrimping was? Was
I
that
don't know
you?
what shrimping is. No, I know you have this Louisiana thing of what it means, but I love shrimp. And so I know you said you don't like shrimp in general. And I think it looks like a shrimp on the moon,
I
not
don't
a
like
rabbit.
shrimp, and I don't like shrimping because shrimping
Yeah,
is
y'all got it.
is
We're not,
oh,
they
is
can
that too
Google
dirty?
that.
Okay, Google. It's not that it's a sexual term, but it's not that bad. It's just gross.
It involves toes
Look up
and
shrimping.
tongues, toes and
Shrimping.
tongues. Okay,
Toes. It's toe
so
sucking. I'm just going to tell you it's toe
that's
sucking.
disgusting. That's disgusting. Stay away from my feet.
Brandy's mad at me
Okay,
now.
I'm not mad. It's funny because I'd never heard that, and anyways, I think it looks like a shrimp on the moon, not a
Shrimp
bunny.
on the moon. Huh.
But the Chinese believe that if moonlight falls on a pregnant woman, the child will be born with a hair lip. I've
Oh,
never heard that.
I've
So
never
that's one
heard
of
that
their
either.
yeah, I've heard some Hispanic cultures have various things, but I haven't heard the Chinese. And the Japanese believe that the moon is always that there's a rabbit on the moon that's always making mochi, which is pounded rice cakes for the celebration of the new year.
Oh, fun. Oh, and we
Yeah.
are in a Chinese, the Chinese year of the
Yes.
rabbit, by the way. We are all
So
in
talk
2023, year of the rabbit.
so let's talk about that. And then I want to talk about tarot specific because I
Sure. And we
tarot
might have
specific.
to do a two-part on this because this is getting to be a long one.
That's all right. Yeah, that's all right. What
That's what
there's so
happens
much
when we nerd out. We're just like, I don't know about our listeners, but we're having fun.
yes.
Yeah, so it is in the Chinese zodiac. We are currently in the year of the rabbit. Technically, we're in the year of the water rabbit because the Chinese zodiac rotates through 12 different animals as well as 5 different elements. So there, any particular year will be a mix of an element and an animal. So we're in the year of the water rabbit. People born in this year will also be born under the sign of the rabbit. My son, who was born in 2011, is actually a year of the rabbit. Which is it's funny because some of what they consider to be the qualities of people who are born on a rabbit year. Interestingly, to me, it doesn't necessarily line up with some of the energy we've talked about with the rabbit. They see them almost as very kind of calm, very into very slow moving kind of energy. Which I thought was interesting because we're talking about them zigzagging and hopping and
Yeah, zigzagging.
swiftness. So it's the energy is considered to be a little bit different. But in general, since we're all under the year of the rabbit, some of the takeaways I saw was that we should all be focusing on rest, introspection, and working smarter, not harder as a whole, as a society.
I like that.
It's considered to be a softer period. It's also every year in the Chinese zodiac is either a yin or a yang energy. So this is a yin energy that the rabbit brings, which is definitely a little bit more feminine and a little bit softer as an energy. Lots of self-reflection, lots of kind of slow pace, really taking your time to meditate and think and be introspective. So I thought that was kind of interesting. It's a nice energy for the year.
So it's interesting because you said the yin and the yang, and I was thinking in my head with the year of the rabbit, rabbits move back and forth. We were talking about that zigzag because you said zigzag and slower pace, but I instantly got the image of the Wheel of Fortune. It's that up and
Oh,
down, up and down.
yes.
So
Yes.
and the Wheel of Fortune in tarot also deals with luck, good luck. You have the lucky rabbit's foot. So you
Right.
have also that principle of, having good times and then bad times. And everything is cyclic in nature, which the rabbit is associated with cycles, life, death, rebirth. And your
renewal.
luck is often good, crappy, in between, good, crap. Like, it's interesting.
Yeah.
So it's very much again, when you create your next deck, I'm gonna need to see a rabbit with the Wheel of Fortune. Maybe he can be like juggling two Wheel of Fortunes or something, or spinning a Wheel of Fortune.
I love that, actually.
Oh,
That's a great idea.
you could do a wheel with the 12 zodiac signs and it's landing on the rabbit. Anyways,
Oh, I like that.
all right. Do you have anything else? Because I want to talk about tarot before we go.
Yeah, again, it's just a little blip that I want to save for the end
Yeah.
because it makes my heart happy. So I'll save it for the end, just to end on a very nice little light, fluffy note. But
Okay,
you
so
go.
you have the tarot disassembled deck, which breaks down. You are the artist, the creator of Tarot Disassembled, and it breaks down the symbolism of the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. And
Correct.
what card is associated with the rabbit?
The Queen of Pentacles.
Yes. So the Queen of Pentacles, give us a little blip about the Queen of Pentacles and this rabbit. What is the Queen of Pentacles and how does it
Right.
associate with the rabbit?
Well, the Queen of Pentacles, the Pentacles as a suit is the element of Earth, is the entire suit of Pentacles, and the Queen is kind of really, she's very fully in charge of her element. She is in her element. She is surrounded by lush, abundant nature. Excuse me. And that rabbit, that little bunny, with all that fertile energy, really, points to the fertile lushness of Earth energy. The way things grow, and growth and creativity, the growth of ideas. So that's what I think of when I look at the Queen and her element, the Queen of Pentacles.
I love that. Because you also, I mean, that rabbit in there is associated, a lot of people don't realize the rabbit is not only associated with the moon, it's associated with Mother Earth, which fits perfectly with the Queen of Pentacles and all that lushness, which took me immediately back to the stories of Osiris and the body slain, torn up, thrown in the river, the hare dressed in the hair to bring the fertility to the land.
Right.
So I think, when you look at the Queen of Pentacles, when you focus, if the rabbit catches your eye, there's a reason that the rabbit itself is catching your eye. And it can be that fertility, that Mother Earth, that life, death, renewal process, and bringing something of long-term growth into your orbit, planting seeds that have something for long-term sustainment. It's not just in an age of consumerism where it's like, oh, I'll just buy a new one. It's how do you plant those seeds for that fertility to continue and provide you that lush garden and that lush
Yes,
growth?
definitely.
All right, what else, what's this thing you got? And then I want to go back through ways that the rabbit may be showing up in people's lives, how they can invite it into their lives, and what it means when it does show up. So what you got?
Absolutely. The last little snippet I have is there is a term for a specific move a rabbit does, where not just the jump, because obviously they're big jumpers, but when they're happy, they'll do this little jump that's like a little jump twist, little gymnastics in the air kind of jump. You probably, as having had owned rabbits, have seen this, and it's called a binky. And I don't know why that made my heart so happy. So when they're happy, they do a little binky, which is a little turn, twist, hop.
I didn't know that's what it's called.
That
Yes,
just
I know
made me so
exactly what
happy.
you're talking about. Have you ever seen bunnies playing babies? They do that a lot. They'll
Yeah.
do the jump and twist. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Just
interesting.
joyful. I love it.
Okay, so what are some ways that the rabbit, hare, bunny might show up in somebody's life aside from like it physically is like jumps out in front of you in your yard or at the park or whatever? Like, what are some ways that you think of the rabbit showing up in somebody's life as a, hey, I'm trying to get your attention?
Well, for me, I tend to see logos because of my graphic design brain, but anywhere you go where there's a billboard or a logo, like when we were first doing the Falcon, I actually drove past an apartment complex called Falcon Crest with a falcon, and I'm like, how have I never seen that before? So, so you'll see it in logos, signage, billboards, and magazine advertisements. If you're looking at magazines, it's fascinating to see all the different ways it can show up for you visually. That's not an actual rabbit jumping out.
So you talked about, would you say it was an apartment complex? What was it, a development?
Yeah, the Falcon
Okay.
one was, Falcon Ridge. I think it was Falcon Ridge, but it was an apartment complex named Falcon Ridge. And I'm like, how have I never noticed this until we talked about the Falcon?
So you already know numbers are a big thing for me, license plates, but bumper stickers is one that I see a lot that I'll derive symbolism, and it doesn't have to be like a traditional, rectangle. It can be like, how people have the animal shapes or the whatever. So it could be something that's literally not a logo, but somebody has stuck on the back of their vehicle, a street
Right.
name. It's paying attention to not just the image, but the names or the associations with it.
Yes.
And then I love that you talked about inviting the rabbit into your life as a symbol, invoking that symbol and kind of doing the reverse. Instead of the universe sending you a message through the rabbit, you kind of say, hey, I'm asking for, or I'm sending this out to invite in. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, and I love that idea. You don't have to wait for symbols to come to you, although that the universe definitely does speak to us like that and gives us messages. You can intentionally work with a symbol. So years ago, my son right now is 12. My husband and I were trying to have a baby, and we were hitting some roadblocks, having a lot of struggle with it actually. And I basically, knowing the bunny to be one of the most fertile symbolic representations, I plastered photos just from printout from my printer at home, printed out bunnies and literally taped them up on the mirrors in my bathroom, on the walls in my bedroom, like everywhere in my house, just so I could soak up all that fertile bunny energy.
I love that. There's different ways that we can. So I know at Easter, in springtime, and just in general, I have a lot of bunny statues and little figurines and stuff that I like to pull out. And I try and really focus on at that time, thinking, what are you planting? What do you want to be fertile for the next year? And getting mindful on and just having the bunnies in my presence. Does that make sense? Like the way that you
Yes.
printed
Yeah.
out photos, I really try and focus. And that's when I do my spring cleaning too. I clean everything out. I put my bunnies up, which I haven't gone up for the last few years, but that's a whole other story. But I'll do my spring cleaning and I'll bust out my bunnies and I'm like, okay, like focus. Everything's cleaned out now. It's that death. Everything's gotten, you know, cleaned, and then you're renewing it and inviting in. So what are some, if a bunny were to hop in front of somebody's out on a walk and a rabbit crosses their path, is it a witch or is it good luck? What is it? What do you think it is?
I will go with good luck. I think that all that luck energy the bunny brings is definitely good luck. If you're seeing bunnies all over the place, it can also, I think, be a symbol of caution because, we talked about the cautiousness of bunnies as being a prey species. So it could be a little bit, especially if they're jumping out, like as you drive your car, or something that indicates, whoa, they probably just jumped out in front of me. They maybe should have been more cautious. I feel like sometimes the way they show up has a little bit kind of slants towards one energy or another, but definitely luck, definitely fertility, definitely leaps and bounds, taking big hops in your life, making the leap. I think all that good positive energy comes out with rabbits too, if they're popping out for you a lot.
And I think the big thing is it pretty much any symbol, even if we're talking about the hawk and the falcon again, it's considering the stories that we've talked about and the key words that we've talked about and the different meanings. When you come across this rabbit, what is going on in your life? What do you need guidance on? And then on that side of it, you also have where does it relate to a story? There's a big difference. Like if you see a rabbit and it's out zigzagging, that can tell you need to be able to pivot to move quickly. Don't traverse in a straight line.
Right.
Versus if you see a rabbit deceased on the side of the road, that would have been like, well, that probably warranted more caution than running out in the road.
Right.
So I think if you take the way in which you're seeing it and also apply it to the stories and stuff like that, that will help you discern better what exactly that message is. Because I know you and I, which is why we're doing the podcast, the universe truly does send us messages on a daily basis. It's a matter of recognizing them and deciphering them and doing it accurately. So a lot of
Yes.
times we'll see what we want to see. And so
Right.
it's like, oh, that's what that meant. And it's like, no, that meant caution. That meant caution,
Yep.
not just run out and frolic free.
Well, it's the same way for anybody who reads cards, anybody who reads tarot or works with cartomancy. It's that same kind of thing. There's not just one right meaning to a single card. There's going to be layers that come in with your own perceptions and your own personal what's going on in your life, all that's going to color the interpretation. And so you need to also listen to your whatever is going on in your life and listen to what your own intuitive hits about that. If you're seeing rabbit energy everywhere, what are your first gut feelings that might be about for you? And you're more than likely going to be right.
And you literally hit the word color. Color can be a big difference too. A white rabbit is not the same as a black rabbit or a gray
Correct.
rabbit or, brown rabbit. You've got the white, which is more of your innocence, your purity. And if you're talking about the tree of life, it's on the pillar of mercy. It's the white
Right.
pillar.
Right.
Which is Jen. I'm the black pillar. If you're on a black rabbit, it can be leaning more towards that darkness, that shadow side, that self, or on the pillar of severity on the tree of life. The gray can be kind of finding that middle ground in the middle pillar. And so, and a brown can be muddled waters. It depends on what you're seeing. And in the Queen of Pentacles, the rabbit is brown. So it's very much that earth color. It's not black, it's not white, it's gray or gray. It's that brown earthiness. So you've got, okay, that maybe a brown rabbit is more of the fertility side. White is more innocence. Black is more of the, hey, take the, stick to the shadows, stay in the darkness, that sort of thing. So I love that you said color because that was like, yeah. Well, that's all I got. You got anything else on the
Oh my
rabbit?
gosh,
At least for now.
my mind is blown with rabbit thoughts right now.
I'm telling you,
So
we're gonna have to go to episode
we
2
definitely
at
might
some
do a
point.
second episode at some point, but for now, I think we've hit a lot of bases. We've hopped on a lot of bases.
Oh Lord, she just said
We've zigzagged all over the place on that.
that is correct. We have. Well, we want to thank you for joining us. We'd love it if you subscribed, if you found us on Instagram or Facebook. And of course, this is on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcast. And we do have the website up at www.kisspodcast.com. Make sure to subscribe.
Yep,
so that you find out when we
subscribe.
have new dropped episodes. And if you feel so inclined, give us some feedback. We'd like feedback so we can get better at what we're doing. Because this is episode 2. Yes, 2.
Yep,
We're only on
episode 2.
Oh,
Yeah.
2. And it's the rabbit. How fascinating is that? Because that takes me back to the high priestess, which goes to the moon.
You crazy girl.
I know. I'm going down rabbit holes now. Okay.
Down another rabbit hole.
Well, we want to thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye.